Picture this, December 28th, 1978. Schleswig-Holstein, northern Germany. Your thermometer reads a comfortable +10 degrees in the morning. You're walking around in a light jacket, maybe thinking about leftover Christmas cookies. Winter feels gentle, almost lazy, but by evening, something changes. The wind shifts, the sky darkens, and your thermometer begins to fall. By midnight, it reads 20 degrees, a drop of 30 degrees in just 12 hours. The most dramatic temperature collapse Germany had ever recorded. And this wasn't just one brutal night. This was the beginning of 7 weeks that would test northern Germany like nothing since the hunger winter of 1947. The Schneekatastrophe of 1979. From late December through mid-February, northern Germany fought against snow that swallowed entire villages, winds that screamed for 72 hours straight, and cold that seeped into your bones and didn't leave for months. For those who lived through it, the memory isn't just of frozen pipes and buried cars. It's of army tanks rolling down neighborhood streets, of babies born in military helicopters, of strangers becoming family when the world outside turned white and silent. This is the story of the winter Germany never forgot. It began quietly, peacefully even. Christmas 1978 had been unusually warm across Germany. Along the Rhine Valley, temperatures climbed to 13 degrees on Christmas Day. Families ate their Stollen and drank their Glühwein in weather more suited to October. The German Alps were snow-free up to 2,000 meters, something rarely seen. Rivers ran high with rain and melting snow. People joked that winter had forgotten Germany entirely. Nobody was complaining. The heating bills were low, the roads were clear. But 2,000 kilometers to the north, in the dark heart of Scandinavia, something terrible was brewing. Arctic air, the coldest in decades, had pooled over northern Sweden and Finland. Weather stations recorded already 7 degrees. This massive dome of frozen air began pushing south, silent and unstoppable, like an invisible frozen tsunami. On December 28th, while southern Germany still enjoyed mild temperatures, the Arctic air touched the coast of Schleswig-Holstein. Warm, moist air from the south met the frozen wall from the north. The atmosphere tore itself apart. First came the ice rain, coating everything, trees, power lines, roads, in a glittering, deadly shell. Then the snow began. Not gentle flakes drifting down, but horizontal sheets driven by hurricane-force winds. And the wind didn't stop. For 72 hours straight, it howled across northern Germany, piling snow into drifts that defied belief. By the morning of December 29, 1978, Schleswig-Holstein had vanished. The emergency alarm was triggered at 8 a.m. Katastrophen alarm, a word that sent chills down spines. The northernmost state was officially declared a disaster zone, but by then, for many, it was already too late. The cold didn't just arrive that December, it conquered. Snow piled into drifts 4 meters high, then 5, then 7. In exposed areas, wind-sculpted walls 10 meters tall, 3-story buildings made entirely of snow. Houses disappeared completely. Chimneys, the only sign anyone lived there. Roads became memories. The Autobahn 7, Germany's great artery connecting Hamburg to Denmark, transformed into a frozen graveyard of abandoned vehicles stretching for kilometers. Imagine driving home from a family visit, your children asleep in the back seat. The snow begins. You slow down, then you stop, because the car ahead has stopped. Within an hour, you're buried. The engine dies, the heater fails, and the snow keeps piling against your windows until daylight disappears. This happened to thousands of people that night. Families trapped in metal boxes, waiting for rescue that might never come. Trains fared no better. On the line to Kiel, a passenger train ground to a halt as snow packed solid around its wheels. Inside, dozens of passengers huddled together, sharing body heat as temperatures plummeted. They waited hours, then days, while Bundeswehr soldiers dug frantically through meters of snow to reach them. When rescue finally came, some passengers had to be carried out, too weak from cold to walk on their own legs. On the island of Rügen in the Baltic Sea, the situation turned apocalyptic. The sea itself froze within hours, something that happens perhaps once in a generation. Ships sat locked in ice, their hulls groaning under pressure. The island was completely cut off. No ferries, no supplies, no escape, just ice in every direction. On New Year's morning 1979, While families across the world toasted fresh beginnings, the Fichtelberg weather station recorded 27 degrees Celsius. Just 12 hours earlier, it had been +26°, a drop of 28 degrees in half a day. Across northern Germany, people woke to discover ice forming on the inside of their windows. Not frost you could melt with your breath, thick ice that needed a knife to scrape away. Your breath hung in the air like smoke. Water pipes burst inside walls, flooding rooms with water that quickly turned to ice. Central heating failed because fuel oil became too thick to flow in frozen tanks. Families dragged mattresses downstairs to sleep beside coal stoves, wearing every piece of clothing they owned. Fathers woke every few hours through the night to feed the fire, knowing that if it died, the entire house would freeze solid by morning. Power lines snapped under ice coatings 30 centimeters thick. Over 500 lines failed in Schleswig-Holstein alone. 80 villages lost electricity for days. No lights, no heating, no television, no phones. In the darkness, without any information from the outside world, people were truly alone. But here's what nobody tells you about the Schneekatastrophe of 1979. It wasn't just about survival. It was about what happens when everything you rely on simply disappears. Around 150 villages were completely cut off from the outside world. Not for hours, not for a day or two, for weeks. No mail, no milk deliveries, no way in or out. The roads didn't exist anymore. Farmers poured thousands of liters of milk into the snow because collection trucks couldn't reach them. The waste was heartbreaking, but there was no choice. Bakeries closed when flour ran out. Bread, something Germans had taken for granted their entire lives, became precious. Families rationed every slice. Hospitals became unreachable. Ambulances sat useless in garages, wheels spinning on ice. Doctors strapped on snowshoes and tried to walk to patients, their medical bags frozen solid, stethoscopes too cold to touch bare skin. And then there were the pregnant women. Labor doesn't wait for good weather. When contractions began in isolated farmhouses across Schleswig-Holstein, there was nowhere to go. No hospital, no midwife, just fear and snow and the howling wind outside. So the Bundeswehr sent helicopters. Pilots flew through crystal-clear frozen air, racing against biology. They landed in fields, on roads, wherever they could find space. Soldiers carried pregnant women through snow up to their waists. Around 70 babies were born during the catastrophe, many delivered with help that arrived from the sky. They called them Heli-Babies. A generation born into chaos, their first breaths taken as helicopter rotors thundered overhead. Pilot Dieter Roeder remembered flying a woman whose water had already broken. "Press your knees together, we're almost there," he told her through the headset, his voice calm despite the urgency. She made it to the hospital just in time. No babies were actually born inside the helicopters, but many came terrifyingly close. In the small town of Hellingst, near Osterholz-Scharmbeck, a young couple faced the impossible. She was in labor. No ambulance could reach them. The helicopter couldn't fly because the storm was too thick even for military pilots. So the army sent the only thing that could move through that frozen hell, an armored personnel carrier from the Schwanweed barracks. The vehicle fought through the snow, meter by agonizing meter, engine roaring against the white. And there, in the middle of a frozen crossroads, surrounded by soldiers in winter gear, baby Annika Ehlers was born inside a military transport. Her first sight of the world was camouflage and steel, and the relieved faces of young men who had trained for war, but found themselves delivering new life instead. Think about that, a child entering the world in an armored vehicle while a blizzard raged outside. That was Germany in January 1979. The Bundeswehr became the heartbeat of the North. 3,000 soldiers deployed across the disaster zone. 75 armored vehicles rolled through Schleswig-Holstein, their tracks grinding through snow that had stopped everything else. On the Autobahn between Hamburg and Hanover, tanks cleared paths for trapped motorists. Helicopters buzzed constantly overhead, dropping feed for starving livestock, medicine for the sick, diapers, and formula for babies. Amateur radio operators established emergency networks when phone lines failed, their crackling voices the only connection to the outside world. 25,000 volunteers joined the massive effort. Red Cross workers, firefighters, ordinary people with shovels and pure determination. And still, despite everything, people died. 17 people lost their lives in West Germany. Some froze in their cars, running engines for warmth until carbon monoxide poisoned them silently. Others collapsed in snowdrifts, just steps from safety, their bodies not found until spring when the snow finally melted. In East Germany, the toll was far worse, possibly hundreds, though the communist government never released exact numbers. One sailor arrived in the port of Cuxhaven after a long voyage at sea. His home was just 10 kilometers away. Rather than wait for roads to clear, he decided to walk. They found him days later, frozen solid in a snowdrift, just meters from his own front door. By January 4th, the first storm finally eased. The wind died. The sun emerged, brilliant against the white landscape. Roads slowly reopened. Children who had spent days trapped inside finally got to play, building snow fortresses in drifts taller than houses, sledding down from attic windows. Laughter returned to the frozen land, but it was a trick. 6 weeks later, on February 13, 1979, the nightmare returned with vengeance. The second storm hit the same regions, but somehow even worse. This time, Niedersachsen took the full force too. In Kreisfriesland, snow walls reached an almost impossible 10 meters high. The Kiel Canal, vital to shipping, froze completely solid. 80 ships sat trapped in ice outside Kiel harbor, their crews helpless. Emergency alarms rang out once more. The same exhausted soldiers pulled on their boots again. The same pilots flew the same desperate routes. The same neighbors helped each other dig out again. One newspaper noted something remarkable. Children had stopped building snowmen. Even they had lost their love of winter. The magic had frozen along with everything else. The cold finally released Germany in late February. Financial damage reached 140 million Deutsche Marks. In East Germany, the effects lasted for years because their coal-dependent energy system had collapsed completely when the brown coal froze in mines and train cars. But here's what people remember when they close their eyes and think of that winter. When power failed, families gathered around candles and played cards until dawn. When bread ran short, neighbors shared their last loaves without being asked. When roads disappeared, farmers hitched horses to sleighs and became ambulance drivers. The helicopter pilots remember the faces of the women they flew to hospitals, the tears of relief when they landed safely. Soldiers remember dropping hay bales to starving cattle from helicopter doors, the grateful lowing of animals who had been hours from death. The news reported it all with typical German calm. Heavy snowfall continues. Travel strongly discouraged. Assistance is being provided. No panic, no drama. Just quiet acknowledgement that yes, this was catastrophic, but we would manage. We always do, because that's what you do. The Schneekatastrophe of 1979 burned itself into Germany's collective memory. Cold enough to freeze the Baltic Sea solid, powerful enough to bury entire villages, deadly enough to claim dozens of lives across both Germanys, but not strong enough to freeze the human spirit. 45 years later, the Heli-Babies are middle-aged now, with children of their own. The soldiers who dug out villages have grandchildren who barely believe their stories. But in northern Germany, everyone over 50 remembers exactly where they were when the snow came. Some winters you never forget. If this brought back memories, share your story in the comments. Were you there when the temperatures dropped? Did your village disappear under the snow? Do you remember the sound of helicopter rotors or tank tracks rolling down your street? Share this with someone who lived through it, and subscribe to keep these memories alive. Because the winter of 1979 wasn't just weather. It was history, and it deserves to be remembered.